Welcome to Midnight Clues.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray.
Nobody will ever catch me. You know, that's a good chilling line from a novel. The villain, a serial arsonist, says it. But what we're about to uncover is that this wasn't just some work of fiction. No, it was a confession written by what might be the most twisted arsonist in American history. A man who was hiding in the one place no one would ever think to look.
So let's go back. Starting in the early 1980s, for almost 10 years, Southern California was living in fear. A whole string of devastating fires kept popping up at stores, in the brushlands. There was no rhyme or reason to it, no suspect, just destruction left behind by an arsonist who was so good, he was like a ghost. They even had a nickname for him, the Pillow Pyro.
And this spree just went on and on. In 1984, there was this absolutely catastrophic fire at an Olds home center. Then in 87, a bunch of fires break out in Fresno, right around the time of a big arson investigators conference. Weird, right? Well, 2 years later, it happens again, this time in Morro Bay, also during an arson conference. Then in 1990, the College Hills fire destroyed dozens of homes. This person wasn't just prolific, they were audacious and, as we'll see, deadly.
And that gets to the real heart of it. That 1984 fire at the Olds Home Center, it wasn't just about lost merchandise. 4 people died in that fire. Ada Deal and her 2-year-old grandson, Matthew, a 17-year-old employee, Jimmy Satina, and another employee, Carolyn Krause, who was just 26. They weren't just victims of a fire, they were murdered. So, how in the world do you catch a ghost? The investigation was huge, but they were getting nowhere. The arsonist used this signature device that basically vanished without a trace. And the biggest, most unbelievable irony, the guy leading the investigation, the most celebrated arson investigator in California, he seemed to be the only one who really understood how this arsonist thought. The device itself was, well, it was genius in its simplicity. It was basically a time delay fuse. You'd have a lit cigarette, which burned slow and steady. That cigarette's cherry would eventually creep up to a few matches that were wrapped right alongside it. The whole thing gets tucked into something super flammable, like polyurethane foam pillows. By the time it all goes up in flames, maybe 15 or 20 minutes later, the arsonist is miles away, untouchable. And who was this brilliant investigator I mentioned? A fire captain from Glendale named John Orr. He was a rock star in the field, the guy you called for the impossible cases. He even gave the arsonist a catchy nickname, the Frito Bandito, because some of the first fires were set in bags of Fritos. He told everyone he was determined to catch this guy. Thing is, he was this guy. The big break really started when a federal task force noticed that bizarre pattern. The fires in Fresno and Morro Bay, they weren't random. They happened during these major arson investigation conferences. So they started to build a profile of their suspect, and what they came up with pointed to a conclusion that was just unthinkable. The arsonist had to be one of their own. The profile they put together was just incredibly specific. This person had to be an expert in how fires start and spread. They had to have a reason to be at those conferences, these major highways, suggesting they weren't local but were traveling to the fire locations. It all pointed to an insider, a firefighter, an investigator, someone from the LA area. You can just feel the net starting to tighten. And when they held that profile up against their own lead investigator, Captain John Orr, it was a perfect match. I mean, look at this. The arsonist is active around LA, or lives in Glendale. The arsonist is an expert, or is the expert. The arsonist was at those conferences, or was at both of them. And here's the kicker. Orr had this uncanny, almost supernatural ability to find the point of origin in these incredibly complex fires. Well, yeah, it's easy when you're the one who put it there. But okay, a profile is one thing. You can't put a profile in jail. You need hard evidence. And they were about to get it from 2 places you just couldn't make up. A lucky mistake at a crime scene, and a manuscript written by the suspect himself. Remember that string of fires in Fresno during the conference? Well, in one of them, at a local craft store, the little incendiary device, it malfunctioned. It just kind of smoldered and fizzled out instead of completely burning up. And for the first time, investigators had their hands on one of the arsonist's signature devices, almost perfectly preserved. This was huge. On that little piece of yellow notebook paper, the part that should have been turned to ash, there was a single, partial fingerprint. For years, that print was their only physical clue. They ran it against every database they had, but nothing. No matches. It was their only link to this ghost. Finally, the case gets kicked up to the federal level, to the ATF. And they have much bigger, much better fingerprint systems that don't just include criminals, but also government employees. They decided to run that print one more time. So after all those years, after all those dead ends, whose fingerprint was it? The call from the lab was just mind-blowing. The lab tech actually thought it was a mistake, that an investigator had contaminated the evidence. He called and said, "The fingerprint we found belongs to an arson investigator. His name is Captain John Orr. Can you tell him to wear gloves next time?" But see, Orr wasn't on that case. He had no business being anywhere near that piece of evidence. The hero investigator was now suspect number one.
And if the fingerprint wasn't enough, investigators got another piece of evidence, a gift, really, from Orr's own incredible ego. While they had him under surveillance, he actually gave his boss a manuscript for a book he was writing. It was called Points of Origin, and it was about a firefighter who becomes a serial arsonist. He basically wrote his own diary.
When investigators read it, they must have felt a chill down their spines. The details in the book were a mirror image of his real-life crimes. He wrote about a fire at a Cowles hardware store, a clear echo of the Olds Home Center fire. In his book, a woman named Madeline and her grandson Taryn die, just like Ada and Matthew did in real life. He documented his own murders, writing about their final moments with this terrifying detached fascination. So now they had it all: the profile, the fingerprint, and a confession written in the form of a novel. The case against Captain John Orr, the hero, was airtight. The man who'd built a legendary career catching arsonists was about to finally face justice for being the worst one of all. For the murders of Ada Deal, Matthew Jimmy Satina, and Carolyn Krause, John Orr was found guilty. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms in prison. No chance of parole. Ever.
And that was just for the murders. His trail of destruction was just staggering. He was ultimately convicted on dozens of other arson charges for fires all over California, including that massive College Hills fire. He got away with it for years, betraying everyone. And you know what? To this day, from his prison cell, he still says he's innocent.
So why? Why would he do it? It was a sick combination of ego and addiction. Orr was a pyromaniac in the truest sense. He got a thrill, a sense of power, even a sexual rush from setting fires. But he also craved the fame. He wanted to be known as the brilliant arsonist and the brilliant investigator who caught him. He was literally the hero and the villain of his own story. The story of John Orr just leaves you with this really dark, unsettling question. I mean, it's about the ultimate betrayal, and it forces you to ask, how does a hero, a man sworn to protect people, become a monster? Or, and this is maybe the more terrifying thought, was he ever a hero at all? Or was he always a monster, just wearing a hero's uniform?